In today's video, we're going to go through 3 exercises for a complete hip abductors workout for both flexibility and strength. Hey, what's going on? Eric Wong here from Precision Movement, and today we're here with another video to focus on a specific muscle group and how to train that muscle group for strength, flexibility, and function. Okay, so today we're talking about the hip abductors, and before we get into any techniques, let's make sure that we know what the hip abductors are. So hip abduction, the movement of hip abduction is simply bringing the leg out to the side. Okay. It's a frontal plane movement, so this is the frontal plane, this is the sagittal plane, this is the transverse or rotational plane. Okay, so this hip abduction movement occurs in the frontal plane. So if you're throwing side kicks, if you're skating, striding out, you're using these muscles. Okay, they're also used primarily for single leg balance, so single leg stance. Whenever you're walking, you're on one leg. If the hip abductors weren't firing, you would go like this. Okay, so if you've got something like a Trendelenburg gait, or your pelvis just shoots out a lot to the side, you might not have a true Trendelenburg, but you get a lot of lateral shift, or a lot of shift in the frontal plane, then your hip abductors may not be functioning correctly. Okay, so you've got to train them, you've got to work them, but then you've got to integrate them into the movement patterns that you need. And that's what we'll do with the last exercise today. All right, so that's the movement, kinesiology. Now let's talk about the anatomy. So the anatomy, there's a couple of main muscle groups. The glute medius would be the biggest and the strongest hip abductor. Okay, that's right around the side here. We got the glute minimus, which is right beside it. It's very, very small. And then we've got the tensor fasciae lata, which can also contribute to hip abduction. But primarily, it's the glute medius. Okay, so when we think about this, the glute medius also contributes to hip extension. So when we think about how are we going to fully lengthen this muscle if we want to stretch it out, then we've got to get into a position of both hip flexion, so we've got to go the opposite, so the glute medius shortens up in hip extension and hip abduction, so we need to go hip extension and hip adduction to fully lengthen it, okay? So we're going to do that with the first technique right here. So you might have heard of this technique, it's called the Bretzel. Great cook, I think, from Functional Movement Systems, FMS, is the one who initially came up with this, and it's just a really great kind of big bang technique which addresses a lot of different elements that a lot of people need addressing. Okay, so let's get into position here. You're gonna lie down on your side, so side lying, bottom leg, you want the hip extended, okay, so it's back, and then you're gonna flex the knee, and you're gonna lock it in with your opposite hand. Top leg, you want the hip flexed to 90 degrees, and then your other hand on top to help push it down to the ground, okay? So I'm gonna show you a couple angles just so you can see the back leg or the bottom leg a little better after. From here, you're basically getting a rec fem stretch, rectus femoris on this leg, okay? And then we're going into hip flexion and hip adduction. So this is where we're getting a really good stretch on the glute medius at the top. And then from the hips up, we get rotational movement, especially through the thoracic spine. That's where we want to focus that rotational movement. So we want to drive this scapula down, okay, to open up the chest. We push this knee down, and that gets a good stretch through the hip abductors and the glute medius right there. So let me just show you other angle. So bottom leg, you want to make sure the hip is extended, flex the knee, grab the foot, and get a rec fem stretch, pull that heel to butt. That also locks your pelvis in so that you're not rotating through the pelvis when you grab this guy and pull it up, okay? So this hip's flexed to 90, push it down with the opposite knee, and then lay back, open up, take some deep breaths, and make sure you're staying long through the spine, okay? Elongation through the spine. Rotational movement is great when you're moving properly through all the spinal segments. If you've got segments that are really stuck, that's when you get into problems with rotational movements. Scapula down and back on the top shoulder. And just stretching out through the glute medius by pushing that knee down across the body. Okay, so that's a static stretch, and that's just gonna help you to get into that range of motion. But we wanna develop range of control. We wanna develop strength throughout the range in the glute medius and in all the muscles. Okay, so the next technique is really great technique. It's the one leg side bridge or side support. So the side bridge position is on your elbows. That's what I call it. Side support position is when you're supporting yourself right on your hand. Okay, so one leg version, let's do the side bridge first. It's simply bringing the top leg up as high as you can, staying in the frontal plane. Don't lift it forwards, keep it in the frontal plane, keep the chest out, shoulders back, good long spine, and hold. Okay, what's great about this technique is we're working both open and closed chain function of the hip abductors. The leg that's closer to the ground, the foot that's on the ground, that hip is closed chain. It's on the ground, and I'm attached to the ground there, so I'm gonna work more of a stabilizing function. The leg that's on top, those hip abductors are open chain, okay? I'm not connected to anything. The limb is moving, so that's gonna work better in terms of activation. So I find that closed chain movements help better with stability and firing up all the stabilizers around a joint, in addition to whatever muscle it is you're trying to work. Open chain movements are better for activating a specific muscle group. Okay, so that's just a distinction, a methodology that I use when I create courses, when I'm thinking about creating programs. Okay, so the one leg side bridge there, or the side support, same idea there. Just make sure you're staying in the frontal plane, not flexing the hip or rotating the body down towards the ground at all. So for that one, you want to do reps, hold times from anywhere from 5 to 20 seconds. I don't recommend doing max hold times all the time when you do these plank type exercises, okay? Up to 30 seconds is fine, but for this technique, 5 to 20 seconds is good, and 2 to 5 repetitions per side is good. A couple sets, there you go. All right, so that's technique number 2. So that's gonna build stability and strength in an isometric position. You're not moving, it's an isometric movement. So what do we want to do if we want to take it up to the next level? Now we've got to integrate this strength, these muscles, into a movement pattern. And the technique that I'm going to share with you today is the lateral cross under lunge, okay? And we can add a little reach to it as well. But to start, all you're going to do, and I've got this mat in front of me just kind of as a guideline to stay in the frontal plane, okay? So I'm not stepping back here, and I'm not stepping to the front. I'm stepping straight across to the side, okay? So you can use a line in the floor or something like that if you want to do the same, okay? So all you're doing is you're stepping under, like so. Get that range, whatever range you can, and you don't have to go super low and back. But you want to stay right in this frontal plane, okay? So you're stepping under, reach, just kind of lightly touch, and then bring it back. Okay, so you can try that out, but then you want to make sure that you've got the correct elements on to ensure proper stability in through the whole leg and hip complex. So for the foot that's on the ground, think about applying metatarsal pressure, so driving down through the ball of your foot and all of the metatarsals, okay, underneath each toe, just like as if each toe has the ball of the foot. It does. Those are called the metatarsals. Put your pressure through there as well as the heel. So you're distributed evenly across the foot, not just all on the heels, okay? So that's step 1. From there, you want to make sure that's attached. Okay, so I'm connected from the metatarsals all the way up, because that ensures that I've got stability right from the feet joints all the way up through the knees and into the hips. And then here, I'm just stepping out to the side, keeping metatarsal pressure here, just lightly touch, okay? And then bring it up to the start position. What I want you to do is reach with this foot, okay? So you're not just kind of throwing it down with momentum, but under control, you reach it, and then you touch. Go as far as you can, metatarsal pressure there, and then controlled all the way up. So go slow motion here. So you've got control through the full range, touch, metatarsal pressure driving through, and return. Okay? So for this technique, anywhere from 3 to 6 reps per side is good. Again, 2 to 3 sets, and that's gonna train those hip abductors. All right? So there you have 3 techniques. We went from a static stretch that hits the hip abductors as well as other areas of the body. For that, hold for 30 seconds, good to go. Then we went to an isometric technique that worked both open and closed chain activation patterns of the hip abductors themselves. And finally, we went through a more movement pattern style or complex movement pattern to integrate the strength that you develop in the hip abductors into a pattern that is relevant to everyday life. Okay, so anytime you're on one leg, that's relevant to walking, running, any kind of movement on your feet, balance, any type of balancing techniques or exercise that you do, you're gonna benefit from that as well. Okay, so there you have 3 techniques to hit those hip abductors up and hit them in a way that's gonna build you towards greater function. Okay, so if you like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos from us at Precision Movement, and visit our website. We've got a lot of articles you can search, sign up for a newsletter, and make sure you don't miss any of the articles or videos that we publish. All right, thanks again for watching. Talk to you next time. Peace.